Hi. Today I'm going to deal with a topic by name constructors in Java. So the constructors in Java, they play a very important role. It is a special method that automatically gets invoked as soon as we create an object for a class. So as we know, whenever we create an object, we use a special member called new. So before we use these constructors, we need to first know a couple of rules. So the first rule is that constructor name must be same as a class name, which is mandatory. Even a small spelling makes a lot of difference. Secondly, the constructors must not have any explicit return type, which is the most important one to be remembered before you create any constructor. So remember that every method in Java will definitely have a return type, at least void. But in case of constructors, void is also not required. So remember that no return type must be specified to a constructor. And coming to the different types of constructors, there are basically two types. One is a default constructor and two, a parameterized constructor. So as the name itself says, a default constructor. So a default constructor is a constructor that will have the same name as a class name as we discussed earlier. And the second most important thing is this constructor will not have any kind of a parameter specified in it. In sense, a user will not specify any values to the members of the class. And the syntax is given out here saying class name and just opening and closing braces and opening flower braces where we define the statements of the class or the statements of the constructor and then a closing brace. So remember that the function parameter or the round braces will not have any kind of a parameter passed to the constructor. So a small example is given below. A class sample is created and the same name sample is defined as a class name. If you can just check it out here, it's very clear that the sample is the name given to the constructor and it doesn't have any parameters, as I told you, just a starting and a ending brace. And then it has only one statement where I'm just trying to print a value called hi. So at my main program, as you know, the syntax and all, we did not discuss all that here. And I'm just creating an object sample yes. S is an object that I'm creating for the constructor and automatically the message hi will be displayed on the screen. That is what the constructor is. So once again, a constructor is a default function or a method that will automatically get executed whenever the object is created. So when an object S is created, automatically the function system.out.println will print a message called hi. That's the first type of constructor. Coming to the second type of constructors, we call them as before that, the default constructors helps us to initialize the members of the class to default values. That is, an integer will be initialized with a 0, a string will be initialized with a null, and other members will be initialized to a default value depending upon its data types, whether it is a float, whether it is a string, whether it is a long, whether it is a real, whatever. Depending upon the data type, a value will be initialized with the default constructors. And coming to the second type of constructors called a parameterized constructors. So the name itself says once again parameterized. So the constructors here will definitely have some parameters initialized. So the statement says parameterized constructors are the constructors that will initialize the members of the class with the values supplied by the user at the time of creating the object. So once again, the time of creating object plays an important role. So let us just check the things. So parameterized constructors are the constructors that will initialize the members of the class with the values supplied by the user at the time of creating the object, as mentioned earlier. In case of parameterized constructors, the user has to provide values to all the members of the class, otherwise a compiler error arises. What I mean is, if my class has some 4 members, member 1, member 2, member 3, member 4. If I'm using a parameterized constructor, I should give all the 4 values for the 4 members. Otherwise, one of the member, in sense, if I give it 3 values, one of the member will not have a value and hence we get an error message or some kind of a compiler error. So just keep it in mind that all the members of the class must be initialized with some value. Okay, and then just a token of thing is that the values of the parameters can be of any order. What I mean is member 1, member 2, member 3. If I specify that, I need not what you call it as play a very attention on that. I can just check out the order in which they are defined and then just give the values to the parameters or use them in the definition of the constructor. So coming to a small example, I'm just giving you an example by name a class called student with only two members by name admission number and a student name. So just check out here, I'm just creating a constructor by name student which is initializing the two members admission number and string. So I'm using what you call it as the formal parameters I and n to get the values from the what you call it as a constructor and assigning them to the actual parameters admission number and student name as we learned from our C language basic functions. And coming out here, I'm just printing a message saying admission number plus student name. That's it. That's what I'm doing. And the important thing to be remembered out here is here. So I'm just creating an object called S1 for the constructor student, and I'm initializing the values 1001 and Lalit. The string Lalit will be initialized to n and 1001 to I. In turn, I will be initialized to admission number and n will be initialized to st name. And when I give that s1.display, it will print me 1001 and Lalit. The same way, the constructor s2 will get the parameters 2002 and Sai, which will be once again given to I and n, and in turn will be printed as Sai 2002 Sai. So this is what called as parameterized constructors, which once again play a very important role when we are specific about giving the values to the parameters at the time of creating the object itself. And last but not the least, we have something called constructor overloading. And as every one of you know, Java's basic or object-oriented concept is that it supports overloading. So overloading is nothing but a concept where we try to create or use same function name, but the functions are differentiated with the number of parameters or different types of parameters. And until now, we know that functions can be overloaded. In sense, general functions, whatever we use in the methods, in the classes, can be overloaded. But now we are learning a new thing where we are very clearly telling that even the constructors can be overloaded. So the constructors can be used, in the sense more than one constructor can be used in a program with different parameters or with a different number of parameters. And depending upon that number of parameters, the constructor will be initializing the members of the class. So to demonstrate that, I'm just giving you a small example wherein I'm creating a class called a student, once again with an ID and a name as in the last example. And here once again I'm assigning the values to ID and name through I and n, the formal parameters. The point to be learned out here is that in the first constructor S1, I'm just giving two parameters 111 and Karan, which will be initialized to the two things called ID and name, only for ID and name. And hence when I say S1.display, it prints only 111 and Karan. It will not give any value of age. But now in the second one, S2, a constructor, this will assign 222 to ID, RN to name and 25 to age. And hence when I say S2.display, it will display the ID, the name and the age as 222, RN and 25. This is called constructor overloading. So this constructor overloading will help us to initialize the object of a class with different number of parameters and different requirement levels in the program. So the programmer will have a real advantage of starting an object with different values while just creating the object. So as a conclusion, I just want to tell you that so Java constructors are used effectively or can be used effectively whenever you want the members of the class to be initialized at the time of object creation, enabling the user to give inputs before any method executes or general method executes. So thank you for watching my video. This is CV Satyanarayana.